Mutation. It is the key to our evolution. It has enabled us to evolve from a single-celled organism into the dominant species on the planet. This process is slow, normally taking thousands and thousands of podcasts, but every few hundred millennia, evolution leaps forward. Hi everyone, my name's Em and welcome to episode 11 of Verbal Diorama. Today we're going to be talking about a recently released movie. It's not often that I go to the recently released movies, but this was something that I really wanted to watch and I really wanted to talk about. And luckily for me, the guest that I'm going to be introducing also wanted to talk about this particular movie. So I would like to welcome our guest. She is ChinLin and she's from the Bingeables Podcast. Hi ChinLin.
Hi Em, thank you for having me.
You are welcome. So when we talked originally about you coming on the show, it was really kind of Dark Phoenix that kind of brought us together in that regard, because I know you love the X-Men movies and I love the X-Men movies, and it just kind of seemed like a natural fit, really. So I'm really happy to have you on so we can talk about this movie. And we're not really going to talk that much about the X-Men franchise because there's a lot of movies in that franchise. But we can talk a little bit about that if we've got time. I know that you are a little bit time restrained today, so we're probably not going to be looking at another 3-hour episode, which I'm sure everyone is completely thrilled with, because normally when I have a guest on, it's around that sort of time scale. So just to kind of bring you up to speed, ChinLin, what I do sort of before I start talking about whatever I'm going to talk about, I just kind of briefly mention what I've been up to. And to be honest, I've kind of been up to a reasonable amount. I've booked onto loads of other shows for like guest slots. So I'm on Shuffle the Podcast in July with Kat. And I'm also booked on to Pulp Serial in August as well. And also, hopefully next episode, fingers crossed if it's all ready, I'm going to be having some brand new podcast theme music. Oh
wow.
I know, I'm really excited. I heard the first draft of it yesterday and it's so good. It's a proper song. It's a proper verbal diorama song. and I'm really excited about it, and the lyrics haven't been finalised yet, but basically she's like a proper songwriter, so she knows how to write a song, and obviously I put forward some really cheesy song lyrics, and she said, yeah, maybe we won't use those, and I was like, okay, I trust you, you're the pro. So yeah, hopefully next episode, but we shall see if I can make that happen. So ChinLin, what have you been up to recently? Is there anything that you've got going on right now?
So we just finished our episodes on Neil Gaiman's Good Omens, which was on Amazon Prime. So we're going to have our next binge coming up next week. So we're planning on recording that later this weekend. And then next week in Dallas, which is where I live, there's going to be an anime convention called A-Kon. It's been going on for like 30 years, wow, which I can't even believe. So I'm going to be going to that. I don't normally go to anime conventions. I do like anime. I'm not as into it as I was when I was younger. So it'll be nice to be in that environment again. And then I am going to have a guest spot with Growing Up Millennial podcast, I think sometime in August.
So am I. I forgot about that. I completely forgot about that. Yes, I have one too.
Nice.
Do you know what your topic is?
I don't know yet because I originally was gonna do it in July, but it's gonna be me and Isaac talking about whatever topic that Adriana wanted. And we had a topic assigned, and me and Isaac were thinking about it, and we were like, well, we're not super passionate about this thing from the 90s. I think it'd be better if we told Adriana, hey, we're not super passionate, and I'm sure you can find someone else to be a guest who would be really passionate about this, and it'll be a better recording. So, well, we can wait until something better, and obviously whatever Adriana can come up with for her August topics.
Yeah, I can't believe I forgot about that. That was... I literally don't know how I forgot. But yeah, that is on my list to do. And I think it's at the end of July that I'm doing it. And yeah, because she sent me the topic through, and it's something that I've never actually seen before, but I've always wanted to see. So I actually went and I bought the DVD because I don't obviously own it or anything, and I'm not sure if I should say.
Oh no, it's fine. We can wait until end of July to find out.
It's one of those movies that a lot of people talk about. I'm hoping that it's so bad it's good kind of movie, but it's pretty notorious because of who it stars. So yeah, I went out and it was a really cheap second-hand DVD that I bought because I was like, I'm not paying full price for this because I don't know if it's any good. But yeah, I'm super excited about Grown Up Millennial, and I can't believe that I forgot that. But there we go. That is sometimes what happens when you're going off memory and not off your actual list. So I do apologise to Growing Up Millennial for forgetting them because I didn't mean to. So what I want to do just quickly, and I know that you are obviously a little bit time limited, but I thought it would be nice for people to get to know you a little bit better before we get into X-Men Dark Phoenix. So what made you want to get into podcasting originally?
So when I was in college, my major was journalism, and I was taking a course called digital storytelling basics. So one of the things I learned was audio storytelling. That was my first exposure outside of radio, where I was like, oh, hey, I can record myself talking on a mic. And I mean, I could interview people, I can tell a story, or hey, later I could podcast. So I dabbled with it a little bit in college, and then I did a little bit of podcasting for a website I used to have back in Austin. In, what was it, 2014 was when we started the website. And then it's been a long time. So last fall, I love television, so I decided that I really wanted to get back into podcasting and actually start a podcast and commit to it. So here I am with the Bingeables Podcast.
Yeah, and obviously you cover all sorts on the Bingeables, because I remember the first thing I listened from you was your Firefly episodes. Because obviously I am a massive fan of Firefly. Rest in peace, Firefly. You are sorely missed. And just recently, because I've not actually watched all of it yet, but I've just started Good Omens. So yeah, I'm going to be going through your Good Omens podcasts. But obviously I can't go through them all at the moment because I haven't actually finished watching Good Omens yet. But I'm really enjoying it so far. So I'm not a complete newbie to the Bingeables, but how would you describe it to a complete newbie?
I would describe the Bingeables podcast as a TV-focused podcast for geeks. We're trying to recommend shows that we feel would appeal to geeks, because I think of myself as a geek girl. Mm-hmm. Isaac considers himself a geek. And we want to, because there's just so many shows out there. It's quite impossible to just watch everything you want to see. And we try to like comb through what we've seen, what we liked, what we think we want to recommend to other geeks. So we started with Disenchantment, which was on Netflix, and then we were Isaac really loved Firefly when it was airing, so I gave Firefly a shot. I really enjoyed it myself, so we talked about that, and we try to touch on a variety of shows of different genres, so fantasy, sci-fi, animation, live action, and I guess in a nutshell, it's for people who feel like they're constantly trying to keep up with so many shows that the general public recommends.
Yeah.
So we want to cater to what we think may interest other geeks.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem, I think, with TV nowadays is, you know, you've not just got TV channels, but you've got obviously cable channels. Like, obviously, you guys have got things like HBO, and then we've got, obviously, you know, you've got satellite channels, we've got cable channels, and then you've got all the streaming sites that are now up. And then it's like, because obviously you've got to pay for all of this for a start. So it soon adds up if you've got to pay for every service. And then you've got all of these shows to watch as well. And I always kind of feel a little bit overwhelmed that, oh my God, how much time? Like, I need to spend so much time to watch these shows because there is so much out there. And so much good stuff as well. It's not like back in the day when most TV shows were mostly rubbish because the acting was bad and the storylines were terrible and the effects were bad. It's like everything since kind of the era of like Netflix and Prime Video and stuff like that. I feel like everyone's kind of stepping up their game a little bit on TV. You know, with things like Game of Thrones, you're getting massive actors, you're getting huge budgets, and it's just like, I think it's a phenomenal time for TV right now. TV seems to be the go-to arena for, you know, good storytelling, good characters, good actors, and yeah, it seems to be booming. And it seems that, you know, Hollywood is really struggling outside of the major franchises and stuff, which is a real shame, to be honest. Speaking of obviously your episodes of the Bingeables podcast, do you have like a favourite TV show that you've discussed? Like what would you say would be your favourite series that you've podcasted about?
So it's hard for me to pick just one favorite episode or topic. Although I will say Good Omens was really quite a delight, and I really, really thought Disenchantment was fun. But I will also say, aside from the binge episodes, we had a time period like last month where we were like, let's take a break from binge episodes and just do something more engaging. So I came up what I call #Question Tuesdays. So I just post a question on Twitter and then I wait for people to respond to them, and then we record and talk about what other people said and what we thought of the question.
Right. Okay. Obviously getting people involved, I found that that's actually been really beneficial for me as well, to ask people questions and to get them involved and get people talking is kind of a really good way to get people kind of then involved in the podcast episodes and hopefully get more people listening, maybe, hopefully. So yeah, I think that it's that kind of feeling of a person actually, you know, answering a specific question or giving their opinion and then kind of being a bit sort of involved in the process. Because obviously I do something similar with each episode I do. I like to ask for comments and stuff about what I'm talking about. And sometimes I get loads and sometimes I don't get very many. Spoiler alert, there's not very many for Dark Phoenix, but...
God.
Uh-oh. Obviously, before we go into talking about Dark Phoenix, what would you say is kind of your ultimate dream sort of from what you do on the Bingeables podcast?
I would like to get over my fear of public speaking and get on a panel to talk about whatever TV show I like at a Comic-Con.
Wow. Oh my
Well,
God.
I'm a huge con goer.
Yeah, I know. I've seen so many photos of you at cons.
And I really love listening to people talk about things that they're passionate about. And someday I would like to be one of those people on a little table or stage or whatever and just talk with other people about a show. I guess the best example I can give briefly, I know we're like 15 minutes in already. There's a Game of Thrones convention that I really love. It's called Con of Thrones. They're actually pretty young for a con. They're only 3 years old. And I love listening to people talk about Game of Thrones anytime, all day. So I guess hearing some podcasters talk about it makes me wonder, oh, well, I guess this is something I want to do someday.
My kind of thoughts on that kind of thing is I understand how it feels or how it must feel to, be anxious about sort of public speaking, because I often kind of feel the same. And I guess my kind of thoughts on it would be, I believe that you will achieve that one day, because you've got to be behind someone. And I always kind of say it on this show, especially when I've got like guests on and stuff, because I fully believe in, you've got to support people, you've got to help people achieve their dreams, and you've got to be there for people. And I know that you will do that one day. I know that, and I don't mean to say it so that you will feel anxious about it. That's not why I'm saying it. It's just that I know that you can do that, because I believe that one day you will do it. And when you do, I will be looking, probably not live, because we don't live anywhere near each other, but but when you do, I will be there, and I will cheer you on. I will absolutely cheer you on, and I will go ChinLin, go. Because but that's kind of the whole kind of podcast support network. That's what we're here for. And if that's your dream and that's what you want to do, I believe that you will do it. Absolutely, 100%.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm like really flushed right now. Thank you. I mean, it's always nice to have the Podern family support you.
Exactly.
And supporting each other.
Yeah, and that's why podcasters are literally the greatest people on the internet, because we are. So okay, right. Let's finally talk about X-Men Dark Phoenix. The first thing I want to do is I just want to let's go through the characters and the cast, because this is obviously a mix of a very well-established cast and quite a lot. Well, I suppose they are established-ish, but the new guys that have kind of come in recently in Apocalypse. In X-Men Dark Phoenix, we've got James McAvoy as Charles Xavier. We've got Michael Fassbender as Eric Lehnsherr, aka Magneto. Jennifer Lawrence as Raven, aka Mystique. Nicholas Hoult as Hank McCoy, aka Beast. And then the newer guys, we've got Sophie Turner as Jean Grey, aka the Phoenix. Ty Sheridan as Scott Summers, aka Cyclops. Alexandra Shipp as Aurora Monroe, aka Storm. Evan Peters as Peter Maximoff, aka Quicksilver. Cody Smith-McPhee as Kurt Wagner, aka Nightcrawler. And finally, Jessica Chastain as Vuk, who is, I actually found out after because I didn't get it in the movie, the character of Vuk is a member of the Dabari race of aliens, who, interestingly, were supposed to be Skrulls. And obviously Captain Marvel beat them to the punch because Captain Marvel had the Skrulls instead. So the movie was the directorial debut of Simon Kinberg, who was the writer of X-Men The Last Stand, as well as Days of Future Past and Apocalypse. Dark Phoenix hasn't been out that long. I think it's been out maybe a couple of weeks, sort of at the point of recording. It had a budget of $200 million. And at the point of recording, it had made $204 million worldwide so far.
Ooh, those are not good numbers.
No, really not. Apparently the worst opening for any X-Men movie ever. The opening was $20 million lower than 2013's The Wolverine. I didn't even know The Wolverine was the previous worst opener, because it's a movie that I actually think has a lot of good things going for it, actually. It's just let down by its final third. Obviously, we're going to talk about Dark Phoenix in a bit more detail. We're not going to go into kind of a plot point by plot point, because obviously, as we've mentioned, that we don't have a great deal of time today. We're obviously going to talk about the things that we liked and the things that we didn't. But the poor performance of the movie is interesting, and I think it's something that we're going to obviously mention in detail a bit later. But essentially, this is a $2 billion franchise. So you would expect that these numbers would be considerably higher. So there's obviously a reason why they're not. But instead of going through the plot points, we'll just go through a quick plot summary for Dark Phoenix. And before I do, obviously, big, massive spoiler alert. Obviously, this is a new movie. If you have not seen X-Men Dark Phoenix, I recommend that you watch the movie first, because obviously everything's going to be spoiled. And although I appreciate the Dark Phoenix Saga is a storyline that many people who read the comics are aware of, it's been done before in X-Men The Last Stand. So people are aware of this particular storyline. However, I would still recommend that you watch Dark Phoenix before we talk about all of the particular points of the movie that we liked and disliked. So again, spoiler warning for Dark Phoenix. Right, plot summary. During a life-threatening rescue mission in space, Jean Grey is hit by a cosmic force that transforms her into one of the most powerful mutants of all, the Phoenix. Wrestling with this increasingly unstable power, as well as her own personal demons, Jean spirals out of control, tearing the X-Men family apart and threatening to destroy the very fabric of our planet. The culmination of 20 years of X-Men movies, as the family of mutants that we've come to know and love must face their most devastating enemy yet, one of their own. Okay. To be honest, I don't even know whether that plot summary made sense, but never mind, we'll carry on. So, first of all, ChinLin, did you enjoy the movie?
Oh, yes, I definitely enjoyed the movie. It was a pretty average movie viewing experience. I wouldn't call it, obviously, it's not the best X-Men movie, but it's not the worst. I don't think it was the worst. Did you think it was the worst?
I didn't think it was the worst, but I guess because I'm comparing it inevitably to The Last Stand, because obviously the source material is similar. It's not exactly the same, but it's obviously the same kind of Phoenix Saga story. And so inevitably I compared it to that. And I still think that the X-Men The Last Stand is worse than this. Because I think at least they tried to go into Jean's inner turmoil in this movie.
Yes.
Whereas I think The Last Stand obviously focused more on the action. And obviously we're going to talk about issues with Dark Phoenix and stuff, but I think they were trying to make it this kind of psychological story about this young woman who's really struggling with this immense power, and she's trying to get help and no one will help her, and so she's essentially pushed into the arms of Jessica Chastain's character, Vuk, who is obviously a bad guy, but she's obviously pretending to care for her. And I just wonder so much. And obviously, I want to talk a little bit about Disney's acquisition of Fox, because obviously that was all kind of going on around this time. They were having discussions, and the movie was delayed a couple of times. It was reshot. Obviously, the ending was completely changed. And I just wonder if it was too much kind of studio meddling to kind of finish the franchise. Whereas if Fox hadn't been bought, then maybe they would have not ended it in such a sort of final way.
I see where you're going with that. I guess that's kind of my feeling too. The movie itself felt a little dragged on. Like there wasn't a lot of there weren't a lot of epic things that happened in the movie itself. But the franchise as a whole, I felt like the studio just wanted to be done with it.
Yeah.
Just like, let's just put this out there and be done with it. And then the merger happened, or acquisition, sorry. And now I'm like, was this movie even worth it? Like,
yeah.
Because what are we gonna see next?
Yeah, it feels like all of the fans wanted this franchise to go out on a bang, and to be epic, for it to essentially be the X-Men's version of Endgame, to have that kind of epic conclusion to this sort of 20-year saga, pretty much.
Yes.
And it just, it didn't even come close. I think I described it after I'd seen it. The phrase I used was half-baked. It felt like there was something there, that there was an idea, and that if it had just been talked about more and given a little bit more action and given a little bit more humour, perhaps. And I know that's a difficult balance when you're talking about a character like Jean Grey and what she's going through. You don't want another character cracking jokes in the background. But if Marvel Studios can do it with something like Endgame, where you can still keep the humour but also have everything that's going on in Endgame as well, it could have been done. It could have retained that the humour that the franchise is known for. But yeah, it felt like an idea that could have been great, but in the end, it just kind of felt like a bit sloppy in the middle, and it's really disappointing. It's because you, as a fan, you go through these movies and there is everything, even the worst movies, there's always something to love, or, a particular scene or a character or something. And I kind of feel like, for example, talking about the previous movie, Apocalypse, there are still some great characters that are introduced in that movie, even though they're not utilised to their to how I feel they should have been. For example, Psylocke. I was happy to see Psylocke.
She was my favourite.
Exactly. And I still feel a little bit of grief that they didn't do more with her in that movie. But still, even though I think Apocalypse is a quite a bad movie, I liked Psylocke. I liked the introduction of Storm in that movie. I think that the actress Alexandra Shipp, I think she's a really good Storm, but she's not given a great deal to do. So, and I think that's maybe the problem with the franchise now, is you've got so many characters and it's just so stuffed. And it's like no one's really given a chance to shine. Let's talk about the good things about Dark Phoenix, because there are some. I don't know about you, but I always feel like with these newer movies that James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender can always be relied on to be really good. And I think generally together they're kind of the linchpins, I kind of feel, of the newer franchise. Even though I felt that their inclusion in this movie, I don't think it was particularly necessary, apart from the flashback scenes perhaps with young Jean and Charles. But Magneto especially felt very kind of tacked on with the scenes in Genosha. And I felt a little bit like I'm not really sure about his character. Like, what is he doing? Like, where is he in his life? Like, he seems to be okay. Yeah, it all just felt a little bit like, oh, we need to have Magneto in these scenes, so let's bring him in. And yeah, how did you feel about James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender?
So when we first saw them come on in the X-Men movies, there was this thing on the internet where people loved McAvoy and Fassbender so much they shipped them as McFassy.
I've never heard of that before.
Wait, really?
Yeah, seriously.
Maybe it was just the U.S. Fans who were saying that, but I love me some McFassy. They have great chemistry.
They really do.
And I've never complained about acting in the X-Men movies. So it's definitely a good point for me in Dark Phoenix, the acting of everyone, including McAvoy and Fassbender.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of whether I felt Fassbender's addition in the movie felt forced, I don't think it was forced, because I feel like it was necessary to see him and Charles together. I mean, Eric and Charles together again. Because if this is going to be the last movie in the franchise, we should definitely have some scenes with them together and work together through this problem.
You know, what you've just said there actually makes complete sense. That it is fundamentally a story about Eric and Charles. So, yeah, I completely agree with you on that point. And obviously I said what I said, and and I take it back. Because, yeah, I guess you're right. It has always been about them and about their relationship. And even in the first set of movies, which is obviously the future set of movies, even though the timelines are different now, but okay, with that Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, there was that chemistry between the two actors and the characters was always really phenomenal, I always thought. And I always remember thinking, you're never going to get actors like Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen again. And then they cast McAvoy and Fassbender, and I'm just like, whoa. Like, they are so good together. I had no idea people shipped them, but clearly it's a match made in heaven, because, I mean, they're two good-looking guys, and they work well together, and, yeah, I am down for McFassy, definitely. I guess it kind of made sense, perhaps, that Jean would go to someone for help, sort of after feeling that she's excluded from sort of the X-Men.
Sorry. I just thought of something.
What?
She had to go to Eric because Logan wasn't in the movie.
Yes.
I feel like naturally her character would go to Logan.
Yes, yeah.
Logan understands her the most, right?
Yeah.
Aside from Scott.
Yeah. Yeah.
But since Hugh Jackman is done being Wolverine, we had to substitute Logan, and Magneto felt like the most natural backup, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this is the first X-Men movie that doesn't feature Hugh Jackman at all. I think
Logan was his high point. Like, I was very happy with Logan, even though it was hella depressing. I mean, impressive and depressing.
It's a phenomenal movie, absolutely phenomenal. And I'm still so sad because I was really championing it for a Best Picture Oscar that year, and I really, really wanted it to be recognised. And I was so sad that it wasn't, because it's not just a superhero movie. It's just a beautiful, character-driven movie. It's almost like a bit of a Western, I guess, as well. And it's so perfect in every way. I absolutely love Logan completely. And that is Hugh Jackman's swan song, and it's perfection. It's absolute perfection. I think even if Hugh Jackman wanted to come back as Wolverine, because obviously we've mentioned that this franchise is essentially a love song between Eric and Charles, and I kind of feel like, is there a place for Wolverine in this movie? Probably not. Anyway,
I think Wolverine would have been the one making those side jokes. Like you mentioned earlier about how we didn't have we barely had any humor in Dark Phoenix, and I think part of that is because, well, Logan wasn't in here, and Logan had some great one-liners over the course of this whole franchise.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, Hugh Jackman, we miss you.
Oh, greatly.
Yeah, he is really the backbone of the franchise, and I know the early movies relied on the character of Wolverine probably a little too much, but I'm not complaining because we got some excellent Hugh Jackman, and he's personified the role now. You know, whoever steps into those shoes, because they will inevitably recast, whoever steps into those shoes has got some massive shoes to fill, you know, and good luck to whoever that person is, because, well, all I'll say is if it's not Laura from Logan, then good luck to them, because it should be Laura. Laura should be the next Wolverine, and yeah, that's all I'm going to say on the matter. We're talking about good points about Dark Phoenix. The younger members of the cast, I think, do a really good job. Especially Sophie Turner. She's got the weight of this whole movie on her shoulders. And I think she does really, really outstanding work, actually. What did you think about her?
Well, anyone who follows me on social media knows that can I cuss here?
If you do, I'll bleep it.
Okay, I won't cuss.
Okay.
Everybody who follows me on social media knows that I freaking love Sophie Turner. That woman is my gal. Through Game of Thrones, through Dark Phoenix, anything with Sophie Turner, I am going to watch.
I mean, we have to kind of say, I mean, she is phenomenal in Game of Thrones. Like, Queen Sansa forever, as far as I'm concerned. Like, she is
Queen of the North.
She's literally Queen of Westeros, as far as I'm concerned. I think, you know, as the seasons progressed, I mean, obviously she started out, she was very young when she started in Game of Thrones, and she grew into this role, and she just played a phenomenal character who knew how to play the game. And I'm just like, you know, she was so young, and I'm like, wow, she is so phenomenal. Because she didn't get much to do in Apocalypse, really. So...
Oh, no, she was definitely a side character in Apocalypse.
And to kind of make her essentially front and centre, that is a lot to put on a young actress's shoulders, you know, especially when the franchise is as big as this. And I really hope that she walks away from this essentially with her head held high, because I think she did great work in this movie. And, you know, the fact that this movie hasn't done well is nothing, absolutely nothing to do with her. Like, she is great. I think that she puts across the emotion and just the pressure that she's feeling, you know, the character of Jean Grey, and the isolation that she's feeling, because she has all this power and she doesn't know what to do, and the torment that's kind of going on in her own mind, and the fact that this thing is essentially controlling her. I think she's great in this movie, and I think that she essentially kind of leads this young cast terrifically, and she will always be, going forward, a good point about Dark Phoenix. Like, I don't think anyone can say that she was awful in this movie, because she wasn't. She's fantastic. Like, considering her age, and yeah, I was blown away by her. I thought she was incredible.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think she did such a great job. I guess seeing the scenes where she's really struggling, and I guess I don't know how to describe it. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, it really shows through.
Yeah, it's like the inner turmoil, isn't it? And I guess it feels a little bit like, you know, when you've got, like, I don't know, maybe like the angel on one shoulder and the devil on another, and you're trying to figure out which is the right one to listen to, and because obviously she's got this cosmic force within her.
Exactly. Yeah.
And, you know, the whole kind of, well, and we'll obviously come to, there's a specific metaphor that's used for Jean, for Charles to explain to Jean about this gift, her telepathic powers, about how it's a gift and stuff like that. But I kind of feel like she had power before, and that power is just like grown exponentially. And how do you even start to comprehend what you do and how you deal with that? And I think she brought that across pretty perfectly, in all honesty. obviously still on good points about Dark Phoenix. Now, I wanted to mention the train sequence because, interestingly, this was a late addition to the movie. This was actually one of the reshoots because the finale previously was in space, and then they changed it. They wanted to ground the movie, and so they basically put it back on Earth, essentially, with the sequence in the train, which I thought was actually really good. I thought the effects were good. I thought it was good that each of the characters got a little chance to show off their powers and what they can do, that they could work together as a team. And yeah, I that was probably, for me, action-wise, the highlight of the movie, because the movie didn't really have a great deal of action sequences, and it mainly relied on Sophie Turner and that inner turmoil that we've spoken about and her experience. But I really enjoyed that train sequence. I thought it was really good fun, and I'm actually really glad because the trailer, it kind of insinuated that the issues with the train were because of Jean, that Jean was doing something and controlling the situation and essentially being the bad guy in that situation. And we actually find out in the movie that is completely not the case, that essentially they are trying to protect Jean, but then when she actually does wake up, she actually is trying to protect her friends, which I really liked. I thought that was a really good sequence. What did you think of that sequence in particular?
I loved it too. It was very X-Men-esque. That's a terrible adjective to use because we're talking about X-Men. But it was the thing we needed to kick this movie into high gear. Mm-hmm. But obviously by the time we got the train sequence, it was already towards the end. Yeah. So it was very short-lived, but it was what we needed, I felt, earlier in the movie.
Yeah, definitely something that, because like I say, when you've got, the whole point of the X-Men is that we want to know about all the characters and what they're doing, but we also want to see them work as a team. And up until that point, I know that we had the rescue in space and stuff like that, which, yeah, I guess they were kind of working as a team at that point, but it wasn't, it felt like the train sequence was fully kind of, this is what we come to an X-Men movie for. It's the action, it's the effects, it's all of the characters working together. And I completely agree with you. It's a shame we didn't get it a bit earlier because, like you say, it's towards the end. You at that point you're kind of feeling a little bit like, well, is this X-Men movie actually going to show us any X-Men, like, doing anything X-Men-y? But, yeah, and like, I think the other good point that I had on my list was the effects, and I think that the effects were good. I love the effect of the cracks in Jean's face with the phoenix.
Oh, yeah, and then her eyes get orange when those powers are coming through. Oh, that was excellent. And I really liked how they showed that in like the official movie posters before the movie came out.
Yeah, and I think that the look of the movie. I mean, obviously, it's a big budget movie, so you expect it to look good. And I think that overall, I think the effects budget was well spent. The only kind of issue that I had, and I know it's there is a reason for it, but obviously, in Days of Future Past and Apocalypse, well, in Days of Future Past, we were introduced to Quicksilver. And we had that wonderful scene in Days of Future Past set to Time in a Bottle, which is basically kind of where he's obviously, everything's in slow motion and because he's really fast. And then we had a similar scene in Apocalypse because that's kind of been synonymous with that character. You have the humour from him, and you have this particular scene where he uses his powers to do something amazing. And like I say, you have it in Days of Future Past, you have it again in Apocalypse, and then they go to do it in this movie with him facing off against Jean. And you think, oh my God, they're going to do it. They're going to do a Quicksilver scene. And it can't, because you know what to expect. It kind of ramps up the tension a little bit. You feel like excited. Oh, what song are they going to use? You know, what is he going to do? Because he always does something really funny, and then you kind of get this point where he's kind of jumping in between kind of debris to get to Jean, and you're like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. And then Jean just smacks him down. And I get the point that they're trying to make. They're basically saying, well, you know, Jean is so powerful that she can see him coming. She knows what he's going to do. She can just react and just smack him down. But I was like, oh man, like, could we not just have something from Quicksilver? Just some little bit of joy.
Can't we give him 5 minutes of him doing his thing? Because we all loved it in the previous 2 films.
Exactly. And I'm like, please. And like I say, I understand why. They're trying to get a point across, the point that she is so powerful. And from her character point of view, I kind of liked it. But similarly, I was like, I just want to see a scene with Quicksilver, like just doing something ridiculous. And I kind of felt like his character, because he's basically been the comic relief. And I know, and we're going to talk about, I want to talk about timescales a little bit later, because essentially this is another 10-year gap. So we're expecting that this character has aged 10 years. And obviously people do mature in 10 years. But still, I mean, you can't set something up in 2 movies and then have the 3rd movie and not pay it off just a little, you know? And I was a bit disappointed with that. But overall, I thought the effects were really good. And to be honest, considering that Disney was in the process of discussions for essentially purchasing Fox at this point, the fact the movie is coherent enough that it actually does make sense, I consider that a bit of a miracle, because there's been so many situations where, you know, movie studios have been taken over and movies have had to be scrapped. There was talk that this was going to be scrapped at one point because they weren't sure what to do with it.
They scrapped Gambit.
Yeah.
I was so sad about it because I love Channing Tatum.
Yeah, and I'm sad about it because I want to see a Gambit movie. And I must admit, when Channing Tatum was announced that he was going to do it, my first reaction was, Channing Tatum, though? And because I couldn't picture him as Gambit, and I really struggled with that. And then I started seeing some fan art of him as Gambit, and I was like, oh, that actually looks quite good. And and then I think, to be honest, I think it was while I was watching Magic Mike, I just thought to myself, maybe this guy could be like a really fun and interesting and sexy, because we know he can do sexy, but it's the humor, and I just, can he get the humor through? And I was like, I think that he can. And obviously now we're never going to see that Gambit, and I don't know if we're ever going to see any version of Gambit, which is sad, but you never know, we might see Gambit in future.
I am not holding my breath with Disney in charge, because I have mixed feelings about Disney.
As do we all, ChinLin.
You make me so happy, but then you piss me off with the things that you do.
Yeah.
But I won't get into it. We're talking Dark Phoenix.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the future of the X-Men franchise is something that we can sort of briefly touch on a little bit later. But I want to talk about probably my favourite part of the movie. I want to talk about the scene with young Jean and Charles, when Charles is talking to her about her gift. And he uses a specific metaphor about a pen. And I'm paraphrasing because I don't know the exact quote. And I'm not intelligent enough to go and find it beforehand, so I'm just paraphrasing here. But it was something along the lines of, you can either use a pen to write, or you can use a pen to stab someone. But it's your choice, because at the end of the day, that the the pen that you've been given is the gift, and it's up to you whether you use that for good or for evil. And I really liked that metaphor. I thought it was a really easy, simple, but yet really effective way of explaining mutation, and about how it's ultimately that person's choice how they use that mutation.
Yeah, I also enjoyed that scene, and I guess that's the theme of the movie overall. I feel like we all have choices, and things are going to happen to us, and it's a matter of how we deal with the situation.
Yeah, because obviously that's kind of the whole point, is that Jean is so torn, but fundamentally it comes down to that discussion that she had with Charles about the pen, and she obviously makes a choice at the end to do the right thing, and that we always kind of knew that was going to be her choice, because she's a member of the X-Men. She is there to do good, but I thought that particular metaphor was really well done, and I thought that James McAvoy just kind of killed it a little bit in that scene. I thought he was absolutely wonderful, because he always is. And I also thought the child actress who played Jean, I thought was quite good as well. It's always quite difficult, I think, with child actors. Sometimes you get good ones, but it's rare you get a really good child actor. But I thought the child actor who played Jean was okay. Like, I wouldn't say she was like Stranger Things child actor amazing, because I don't think any other child actors in the world are as good as those kids. But no, I thought she was good, and I thought she handled that particular scene really, really well. Do you have anything that you wanted to kind of add, like about things that you really enjoyed about Dark Phoenix?
I loved the score. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to film scores, so I didn't realize it was Hans Zimmer who was scoring until the credits came. I love Hans Zimmer, John Williams. They're both legends. There's this French composer who's really good, and he's done a lot of Hollywood films. Alexandre Desplat.
Oh yes, yes.
Yeah, so like I love movie scores, and I really enjoyed this one. So I was like, oh hey, Hans Zimmer did this score.
Yeah.
Nice.
It is a beautiful score. It's really lovely. And I know that I think generally a lot of criticism has come in the past for like the X-Men movies, the scores, and that people don't think that they're memorable. But I would always pick up an X-Men movie score pretty much straight away. But then I guess I have watched quite a lot of these movies a lot. I mean, it's difficult when you're talking about scores, because there are some scores, like you mentioned earlier, John Williams. He's done probably some of the most famous scores in modern cinematic history. And obviously, the last episode, I was talking to Sade about Pirates of the Caribbean, which obviously, again, has just a so completely memorable score. As soon as you hear it, you know it's Pirates of the Caribbean. I really love the score for Dark Phoenix, but I don't think it's going to kind of go down in history as one of those kind of really memorable scores.
Oh no!
But that's such a beautiful piece of music. So yeah, to be honest, I didn't know it was Hans Zimmer either until you mentioned it just now, because obviously I didn't even think to check. But yeah, he's done some fantastic scores.
So my favorite film whose score he composed was The Dark Knight.
Yes.
That one to me is the most memorable.
Yeah, because it's so like, it feels
intense.
Yeah, that's the word I was thinking of. Like, I was going to say moody, but I suppose it is a little bit, but it is like intense, and it really kind of draws you in to the movie. And yeah, I mean, I didn't even think to mention that, but yeah, it is a wonderful score. Definitely a good point about Dark Phoenix.
And then I had one more good point that I wanted to add.
Sure.
And you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. I really liked that the film focused on the emotions and the intimacy of Jean Grey, because, like you said, she's dealing with this inner turmoil, and it's more psychological as a whole versus adventurous.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think you can kind of play it to both sides. Like, to me, I think it was a good point because it makes the film stand out a little bit more than your average superhero film. But because we don't have as much action, it's one reason why it was a flop.
Yeah, it's definitely not the X-Men movie that people are used to seeing.
Exactly.
And yeah, I think because obviously we've both spoken about how wonderful Sophie Turner is, and she is the focus of all of what you've just said. So pretty much all of the emotion and the intimacy. It's all kind of focused on her, and everyone around her is a bit of a byproduct of that. And it is it's more of a psychological drama, really, with this kind of the superhero bits are just kind of add-ons, because it is more of a character piece about Jean. But then I think the movie struggles quite a lot because obviously the story is about Jean. But then you have all of these actors who are essentially billed above Sophie Turner. And in the grand scheme of Hollywood, obviously, you need to keep those actors happy and involved in the story as well. So if the movie wasn't an X-Men movie, and I know this doesn't make sense because it is an X-Men movie, but if it wasn't an X-Men movie, if it was just a sort of standalone feature about this kind of young mutant who is really struggling with all of these emotions and the power and everything, then perhaps it would have worked. I guess I'm trying to say perhaps it would have worked as a standalone piece rather than an ensemble part of this whole franchise, perhaps.
Yes, and I want to bring up Logan again as a good example of this because they did a really good job with that one.
Yeah.
Logan wasn't your typical X-Men movie, but, you know, he had his own story, he had his own issues to deal with, he had his own adventure, and we do see Charles, we do see the people who are after them, so it's got some aspects of an X-Men movie that you would expect, but we're solely focused on just Logan.
Yeah.
So I think Logan did a really good job of doing that, and we just don't see that here with Dark Phoenix.
Yeah. But I think you make a really good point about Logan, though, is that it's not canonically, it is part of the franchise, obviously, but it's essentially a spin-off. So perhaps in that kind of similar vein, if they had taken this story and, you know, done it as a spin-off and without having to include a lot of the other kind of storylines that were going on at the same time with obviously other mutants and stuff like that. I mean, Logan, I think, is a bit of an anomaly in this franchise in that it's a great superhero movie, but it's also a great all-around movie as well as a great character piece. And I know we've kind of touched on Logan previously, but I completely agree with you that if Logan did it, then why couldn't Dark Phoenix do it? But it couldn't do it. and it's like, yeah, I'm still not entirely sure the hows and the whys and stuff. But it's not a terrible movie. Basically, what we're saying is it has good points. It's not terrible. I would implore anyone, if anyone's listening to this point and they haven't seen the movie, I'd still question, well, why did you not listen to the spoiler warning? But it's not a terrible movie. It's not all bad. There are some excellent things in this movie that just aren't given chance to be excellent. And it's a bit of a shame, really. Like we mentioned, that the franchise is essentially kind of fizzling out when it should be going out in style. It's disappointing, but it's not completely terrible. It's basically what we're saying. I feel like we're not doing a very good job of saying good things about Dark Phoenix, but yeah, essentially there are good things. But inevitably there are some not brilliant things that I think we do need to talk about. So the previous movie was X-Men Apocalypse. So basically the general storyline of Apocalypse was you essentially had a very powerful mutant who was akin to a god because he was so powerful and so old. And he obviously, because all bad guys want to take over the world, etc., etc. And at the end, the X-Men managed to defeat him. Yay, all is good. Whoop, whoop. And then this movie is set 10 years after that. And my initial question, I guess, was why wasn't this in any way a sequel to Apocalypse? Because I kind of felt like maybe it would have worked better if it was, if you had some sort of continuation of something to do with the previous movie. Maybe that might have helped a little bit, sort of ground Dark Phoenix into the franchise a little bit more. Apocalypse was not a good movie, but it did have good points, like I've previously mentioned. I'm sad that some of the characters we met in Apocalypse didn't come back in this movie. But some of them did, obviously. We've got Storm, which is great. And Storm, I think, she doesn't do much in Dark Phoenix, but she still gets a chance to shine, which is wonderful because Storm's a great character. And again, it's just one of those things when you're working with an ensemble cast, inevitably people only get little opportunities to shine. It's not really an issue. I guess it's more of a question because I honestly don't know why they've decided to go down this kind of 10-year gap each time, because it really doesn't make sense at all.
I have a question for your question.
Okay.
So Apocalypse came out in 2016, and then Logan came out in 2017, and then we had Deadpool 2 in 2018.
Yeah.
So was Dark Phoenix it didn't come out sooner because of production issues and they had to remake some of it?
Yeah, I think it was originally scheduled to come out last year.
Yeah.
I'm not sure of the exact date, but I know it's been put back twice because I know it was put back to February of this year and then it was put back again to June of this year. But originally it was supposed to be out last summer, I believe.
Oh, wow. A whole year then.
Pretty much a whole year.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a multitude of different things. I think it's obviously to do with the acquisition talks. It's to do with the fact clearly they weren't happy with what they'd originally done, and they did several reshoots. And it could possibly be as well, if you're a studio, you don't want to release certain movies at the same time. And obviously, when the first Deadpool came out, they didn't expect that to be as big. And inevitably, Deadpool 2 was bigger. So you're not going to want to release similar movies based around sort of the same franchise at the same time. So that could have something to do with it as well. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, so I mean, we've obviously had a 3-year gap. Yeah, pretty much. Well, I suppose it's more 2 years. If they were planning to release it when they were originally, it would have been a 2-year gap. Have I answered your question? I think I have, haven't I?
Yes, you did. Okay. My question was a question to your question, which, well, because I really don't know why this couldn't have just been a sequel to Apocalypse, but
it's obviously a decision.
I mean, it's already done.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's obviously a decision they made. They wanted to go down the Dark Phoenix route because obviously it worked so well for them last time. And the thing is, I say that, jokingly, but it really did, because The Last Stand made a lot of money. It's like the third highest grossing X-Men movie of all time. It was so successful. And they obviously wanted to do that again, and they wanted to ideally make that, make a lot of money. And it kind of faltered quite spectacularly. We talked a little bit about the younger members of the cast, who generally, Sophie Turner, excellent. Pretty much all of the younger cast members that we've been introduced to thus far, I think they do really good stuff with what they're given, but it's not much. Let's talk about Jennifer Lawrence for a little bit, because Jennifer Lawrence, firstly, clearly did not want to be in this movie. I felt like she didn't even want to be in Apocalypse. I read somewhere that she basically did not want to come back for this movie, and they essentially persuaded her to come back, and she was like, well, I want to get killed off. So yeah, they kill her off very, very early on. And I mean, how did you feel about Mystique's death? Did that affect you in any way?
I didn't like that they used her death as a catalyst to bring Hank and Eric together. But I had no idea Jennifer Lawrence was not wanting to come back.
No, she really didn't.
Although the franchise has been dragged out for a while, so I can see how it'd just be another checkbox to her.
Yeah, I think she obviously saw it as essentially a guaranteed paycheck, which is fine. Mm-hmm. Like, at the end of the day, she's got bills to pay. And I absolutely adore her as an actress. Just generally, I think she's wonderful. But I think she signed on to the X-Men movies at a point in her life when she was obviously quite up and coming. When you've done a job for a little while, you get a little bit bored of it. And I think that's only natural. But I wasn't particularly thrilled by her performance in this, and I think that when you've got a younger roster of cast members who are really trying very, very hard to be the best that they can be, I feel a little bit like the older cast members need to sort of set a good example in a way and be professional. And I'm not suggesting that Jennifer Lawrence isn't a professional, because we all know that she is. But I feel like on screen it's quite clear that she doesn't want to be there. And I think that takes it away a little bit from those cast members that are really trying very hard. That was just a bit of a disappointment. I knew about the character's death because it was basically given away in one of the early trailers. They had like a funeral scene, and they had this scene beforehand with Jean doing something to Mystique, and it's like, oh, so they kill her off then. And it was basically the worst kept secret on the internet for some time.
Oh my god, now I feel I did not even remember that in the trailer.
Oh wow, maybe we saw different trailers.
When did the trailer come out?
Pardon?
When did the trailer come out?
I'm trying to remember, because I know there were several trailers. Maybe we saw different ones, because obviously they do multiple trailers. But I went to see the movie with my sister, and my sister's a big X-Men fan as well, and she was completely shocked. We walked out the cinema and she was like, I had no idea Mystique was going to die. Did you know Mystique was going to die? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, you didn't know? And she was like, I had no idea. I was so surprised. I was like, no, Mystique. And she was really upset about Mystique dying. And I was just like, whatever. Because I just felt like Jennifer Lawrence didn't want to be there. So I just felt a little bit meh about the character. And yeah.
So from what I think of Jennifer Lawrence's performance, now that you put it out there, it does seem like she was phoning it in. I just figured that was because she knew she just wasn't going to be in it for that long, because there's so many characters, you can't give everyone the time that they deserve.
I think I know what you're trying to say. And if you've got a large ensemble, if you're acting in an ensemble, you know you're not going to get the big monologues and all of that. But I think with her specifically, she they persuaded her to come back, and she was like, well, I will, but you need to kill me off early on. So that's what they did. And they wanted to do it, I think, as a massive kind of emotional punch that, oh my God, this is how powerful Jean is. Like, she can kill someone like Mystique. But I just didn't feel that emotional punch. I was just like, eh. I know that sounds terrible, but because I knew that Jennifer Lawrence didn't want to be there, so I just didn't feel like that connection, I guess.
Oh, no, I get it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
get it.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but did you feel like the outfits that they wore just looked really cheap and awful?
I mean, honestly, I feel like the costumes just get worse every time.
They do. It just felt like it looked like really cheap polyester, like from the 70s, which, I mean, technically they are in the 90s, but still, with their yellow X. And I get that they've done it to be, because essentially that's kind of the outfit that they wear in the comic books is with the yellow X, but it just didn't look great on screen. It just looked really cheap.
That's maybe the reason why the costumes were cheap looking is maybe because they spent a lot of budget on doing the special effects. They had to cut it somewhere.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't have the biggest opinion about the X-Men costumes from recent movies, just because I feel like they mostly all look the same. It's mostly black, a little bit of yellow
Yeah.
or silver, kind of a little metallic gleam to it, but otherwise it's nothing that makes it stand out. My favorite costume from recent movies was Psylocke from Apocalypse.
Oh, she looked so amazing in that costume it was like a midnight metallic blue, wasn't it? And with like a red like belt sash kind of. Oh wow, I mean, she looked so gorgeous. Just, yeah, because that was Olivia Munn, I believe, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, she's gorgeous anyway, but in that costume I was like, wow. I miss her so much. I wish they'd done so much more with Psylocke, because I think that she could have been like a really great character if they'd only given her a bit more to do. But yeah, she was gorgeous in that movie. Can we talk a little bit about Jessica Chastain?
Oh my God, yes, girl.
Because she's an incredible actress, just generally. Like, Jessica Chastain, we know she's phenomenal. She obviously got the call to do this movie, and she was like, yep, sign me up. I want to be in an X-Men movie. And so you think, okay, we know that McAvoy and Fassbender are great. We know that Jennifer Lawrence can be great because, you know, she's won an Oscar, so we know she can act. And then Jessica Chastain comes along and you're like, she's going to be phenomenal. And then you go into the movie, and I walk out of the movie and I'm just like, what was she doing? Like, what was her role? Like, what?
I think no, I feel you exactly. I think the reason why Jessica Chastain, why her character just comes off very flat, is because we just don't know that much about the enemies in general.
Yeah.
Like, we have very underwhelming villains. We had this with Apocalypse, and the film just gives us the bare bones about Jessica Chastain's character and the Debari, was it? Yeah, so there's just not a lot for her to work with, so she's doing the best with what she's got in the script.
Yeah. And it's really unfortunate, because when you've got an actress of her caliber, you really want her to do something to get her chops into it, and to really be a spectacular villain. And I really like that you called back to Apocalypse, because obviously that was Oscar Isaac, who, again, a phenomenal actor, really great. We know that he could really give you a fantastic performance, and yet you stick him under a ton of Apocalypse makeup and he just falls flat. And I feel very much, I completely agree with you, Jessica Chastain, like, they obviously had this vision of this antagonist, and I don't know whether it's been lost over maybe some cuts or reshoots or what, but I just, yeah, it was like, well, why, what is their purpose? Like, why, obviously we know they want the Phoenix, but why? Like, yeah, it was just, honestly, so confusing. And I'm like, why get someone as amazing as Jessica Chastain just to kind of stand and glare at people? Because that's essentially all she does. They go into that hotel room and she shows her like essentially like a map of the stars kind of thing. And I'm like, well, but did you have to go into the hotel room to show her that? Like, could you not have shown her that anywhere? But okay. And it just felt very, very confusing. And yeah, I think I did read that they wanted the Skrulls. And it's obviously to do with the rights and who has rights to what. And I don't know whether Marvel Studios just basically said, oh no, we want to use the Skrulls, you can't use them. Or they made a deal on it or whatever. But essentially, these are also shape-shifting aliens like the Skrulls. Maybe they didn't want to use the Skrulls because they didn't want to confuse people, because the Skrulls, spoiler for Captain Marvel, are the good guys in Captain Marvel. So maybe they didn't want to confuse people. But yeah, it was a really confusing role. And essentially what you want from your baddie in X-Men is you want them to essentially have a purpose. And I always feel that historically Magneto has always kind of had shades of grey. He's always wanted to do what's best for mutants. Whether that makes him good or bad is irrelevant to him. And so I've always felt that as a bad guy, in inverted commas, Magneto has always been very fascinating. He could sway either way depending on whether it's good for him and good for mutant kind. But yeah, Vuk, I'm like, yeah. Do you know what? I was just going to, the way I would sum it up is I would say like, what the Vuk? Because that's how it feels. I'm like, what?
You should get that trending.
Do you think?
Yeah.
What the Vuk? What the Vuk was that? Like you say, it's just disappointing. There's obviously script issues anyway, because no one's really given anything to do. When they do something, it's not like there are really any memorable lines or quotes or anything, apart from obviously the aforementioned pen metaphor, which is excellent. The script just felt very jarring. It felt like we've mentioned earlier, there was not really any humour or anything. And there's a particularly terrible line that coincidentally Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique says. They've obviously wanted to use the line for a specific reason, but it just feels like it's pandering to the audience. And I didn't feel like, personally, that it was of benefit to me at all, because she mentions about that the women are saving the men and that you should rename the team X-Women. They wanted to say it for a reason, but it just felt like it didn't feel right. It didn't feel like it spoke to me as a woman. I mean, I don't know if you felt differently or whether you felt the same about that, or...
I felt nothing.
It's just such a throwaway line, and it feels like they wanted it to be Mystique, you know, standing up for womankind, like, sisters are doing it for themselves over here, Charles, like, you should rename it X-Women. And then it's like, it feels like there should be a tumbleweed, like, rolling across the screen. Because there's like nothing. There's nothing there.
Well, and plus, she's really pissed at Charles in this scene. So it doesn't have the impact that we would want it to have.
Yeah.
She's not making a speech about the women on the X-Men team. She's just kind of retorting at Charles.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like there's nothing behind it. Just like you say, she's just angry. Like, she doesn't have a point to make. For example, I know, and I know this is another scene that people have said is pandering to women, but the scene at the end of Endgame with the women, I loved it. I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. This is what I want to see. And I was really in the moment. And I think that they wanted it to be the equivalent of that. And for all of the women to just stand up and go, you go, Mystique, I'm with you. Whereas it's like, nothing. There's nothing there. I feel nothing. But I feel like I should have felt something and I didn't.
And I mean, she was phoning it in.
Yeah.
Like, part of it was her performance, aside from the lines that she was saying. I don't know.
No. Yeah, I think Jennifer Lawrence she's a bit of an issue in this movie in general. Like you say, she is phoning it in. It doesn't feel to me like she wants to be there. So in a way, I guess it's kind of good that she dies so early on. I'm trying to remember exactly when. It must be about 30 or 40 minutes into the movie she dies. So it's quite early.
Yeah.
Which I guess is a bit of a blessing, really, for the movie in that respect. Because...
Well, I guess she doesn't have much to do anyways, even if she did stay alive.
That's true. Because let's be honest, no one's got anything to do in this movie apart from Sophie Turner. And as we've already mentioned, she does stellar work. So, yeah, all of the rest of the members of the cast just turned up, did a bit and got paid and left. So, good for them, though, because it seems like really easy money. But yeah, obviously the film has suffered. I want to... if it's okay with you, talk a little bit about these 4 movies. So obviously we've got X-Men First Class, which was set in the 60s. Days of Future Past was set in the 70s. Apocalypse was set in the 80s. And this is set in the 90s. So essentially we've got the best part of 40 years worth of X-Men stories here. With the same cast each time. No one appears to be aging like a day, which is amazing. Like obviously the mutant gene is doing something wonders for their skin. And when we're talking about a series of movies that take place over this length of time, as we're going through the franchise, the movies kind of started high with First Class and continued high with Days of Future Past. And then we kind of took a massive step down with Apocalypse and again with Dark Phoenix. Do you think that maybe the 10-year gaps in between could be part of the problem? Like, could it be that it doesn't feel realistic that these characters are actually aging 10 years each time we see them, maybe?
Yes to what you just said.
Yeah.
It's not realistic because all of the newer cast are younger actors, and why would you want to put aging makeup on them?
Yeah.
And then Apocalypse was set in the 80s.
Yeah.
Dark Phoenix in the 90s. I mean, Days of Future Past was personally my favorite of the newer films. Yeah. So I feel like it could have just ended there.
Yeah. No, do you know what? I feel exactly the same. Like Days of Future Past is my personal favourite as well, because I love the multiple timelines and the fact that they go between obviously the newer cast and the original cast. I think that's why I was so excited for Apocalypse, and then I was so let down by Apocalypse. And I do feel very much like, and I know that we're talking different timelines, but if we compare the actors in these movies to their original counterparts, and bearing in mind the original movie came out in the year 2000, so canonically this movie being set in the 90s, there's only a 10-year age difference between these characters, and when I'm talking about Charles and Eric specifically, to Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen characters. And obviously the other actors, Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, look considerably older than James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender. So, and I know we're talking different timelines because the timelines split in Days of Future Past, but still, I mean, there's a certain amount of unbelievability in that for me. Like, how do you go from Michael Fassbender to Ian McKellen in 10 years? That just doesn't make sense.
Honestly, I don't even think about that stuff with these movies, because in the end, it's a movie.
No, I know. And to be honest, the way you think is probably the way that I should think. because I obviously put far too much thought into this franchise and into, movies in general. And that's obviously, that's my issue. But
oh, no, it is not an issue, girl. Like, you are a film geek. Wear it, be proud of it.
No, I absolutely am. But then sometimes I wish that I could look at it in that way and just go, yeah, but it's a movie, so I'll just leave it as it is. But my brain doesn't work like that, and I'm constantly kind of comparing, and that's probably not the right thing to do in a sense of enjoyment of these movies. But I can't help but compare them because I'm such a fan of the franchise, and the franchise means so much to me. And I've brought it up a couple of times before, talking about X-Men as just kind of an entity, the movies and the cartoon specifically, about how much it meant to me as a child to understand that being different was okay, and that the X-Men, I found like a group of characters that I felt that I could relate to, even though I didn't have special powers, but I always felt a bit different as a child, and obviously you kind of get conditioned to, you've got to act a certain way. If you're a girl, you've got to do certain things certain ways. You've got to play with certain toys, etc., etc. And I never wanted to do that. So I was like, well, I don't understand why I don't like girl things, because I never really have liked girly things. And it was the X-Men that kind of, although it's obviously talking about something different, and the X-Men has always been a bit of a metaphor for LGBT people, and I'm not a member of the LGBT community, but I always felt like I was different to other girls my age. And watching the X-Men and understanding that, actually being different is great. Like, you should embrace your difference, and you should find people who are like you and embrace it with them. And that's obviously why I'm here. Like, that's why I'm podcasting, is to converse with people who think the same as me, people like you, and it makes me feel like part of a community, and that's what I love. So but yeah, the X-Men means so much to me, and that's another reason why I'm so sad that this is not the ending that I expected. And I think the 10-year gap is a part of that. I think that it hasn't worked well to have those gaps, and the early movies I understood why, because they wanted to include certain events that had happened in the real world at that time. But now it just feels like it's a bit of an afterthought, and no real care or attention has gone into why are those movies set 10 years after. If this movie had happened soon after Apocalypse and it explained the aftermath of Apocalypse and what that meant to the world, then that might mean a bit more, but as it stands, it doesn't, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit earlier about it's seriously underperformed at the box office, and it's pretty much, I think, considered a flop. It's come out, I think when I saw it, I'm just trying to remember how many people. I think it was maybe me and my sister and maybe 6 other people in the whole cinema screen, and that was it. And it was a Saturday it opened, so that was opening.
Wow,
that was opening weekend.
6 other people in the theater?
Yes.
My goodness.
Yeah. So yeah, I think the general buzz about this movie, even before it came out, was just so negative that people just didn't want to even see it.
So I went to see the movie on June 16th, Father's Day in the U.S., but I actually just went with one of my good friends from college because she recently moved to Dallas and we meet up once in a while. So we were like, "Oh, I want to go see Dark Phoenix. How about you?" She was like, "Oh yeah, I love X-Men. Let's go see it." And at the time I watched it, it was a good movie experience, but it's like you said, ultimately disappointing in the flop. Aside from, all the great things that we already mentioned. But yeah, it was not a good ending for the franchise.
No. And obviously bad word of mouth, which essentially is what this movie has got. I think it's currently at 22% on Rotten Tomatoes. So, bad word of mouth is essentially going to kill this movie completely out of cinemas. So, because if people know that it's bad, then they're not going to spend their hard-earned money on watching it. So, it's I can't see a scenario where it will magically all of a sudden revive and come back, or even you can't even rely on DVD and Blu-ray sales anymore because people don't really buy DVD and Blu-ray apart from me. And I don't even know if I'm going to buy this. I probably will because I have a little Blu-ray X-Men collection. So I did buy Apocalypse for that. So I probably will buy this on Blu-ray, but only because I feel like my collection wouldn't be complete without it. But that's the only reason, and that's a bit sad, really. I think it's a multitude of different things of why it's failed.
Yeah. And I just want to mention one quick thing before we move on.
Sure.
Like my 2 cents about another reason why it underperformed. It's not your typical superhero formula movie where you've got a bunch of good guys facing a bunch of bad guys. And we both mentioned this earlier. It's just more emotional and psychological with Jean.
Yeah.
And it's less about a mission to save the world or, mankind.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you on that point. And like I mentioned earlier, even if someone did enjoy the movie and say to a friend, "Oh, you should see the latest X-Men movie," and they say, "Oh, well, what's it about?" And then they tell their friend, "Oh, well, it's about the psychological impact of the Phoenix on Jean Grey," then the other person might go, "But hold on, I don't want to see that. Like, where's the explosions and the amazing sequences and fight scenes and all of that?" Like, and
honestly, if one of my friends asked me, should I go see Dark Phoenix, my honest opinion would just be, maybe wait for it to come on Netflix or Hulu or something.
Yeah, to be honest, that would probably be my response as well. Just because obviously a cinema ticket costs a reasonable amount of money anyway. And I kind of feel like if I said to a friend, "Oh, definitely go see Dark Phoenix," that they might sort of be a bit cross that I'd made them spend that money on a movie that actually wasn't all that great. So yeah, I think it's just going to be a bit of a snowball effect now, because I think the movie will very shortly disappear from cinemas because people just aren't interested in it. And if it's got bad word of mouth, people are going to be less interested. And I think it's just going to be one of those that I think disappears quite quickly. And yeah, I mean, obviously streaming services, Disney are going to be launching their own streaming service soon.
Oh, right. Disney Plus.
Yeah. So I expect, now that they own Fox, I expect all of the X-Men movies will be on there at some point, and possibly this one will premiere on their streaming service.
Yay, another streaming service to pay for.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is that it's all about the streaming services now. And I've been umming and ahhing because we're not going to get Disney Plus for a while anyway, because obviously it will come out in the States first. But then when it comes out here, I'm like, do I want it? Do I want to pay that much? And then I'm like, but Disney own everything. So if you don't have it, then you don't get any of the Pixar stuff, the Fox stuff, the Marvel stuff. And I'm just like, and obviously Disney's original back catalogue. And I'm like, I think I need Disney Plus. I think I do. because they own everything now. Oh, and Star Wars, obviously, all of Lucasfilm.
Oh, yeah.
So,
oh, man.
So, yeah, basically, Disney own everything is essentially what we're saying. Speaking of which, obviously, Disney have now acquired Fox and all that Fox own. So, obviously, they now own the rights to the X-Men, to Fantastic Four, which were obviously both previously owned by Fox. So we probably will see the Fantastic Four in the MCU at some point, and inevitably we will probably also see the X-Men. They've said it's probably not going to happen. I think they've said for 5 years.
I think 5 years is a good amount of time to just wait.
Yeah, I think we need to let the dust settle on this franchise now, definitely.
Yes.
And maybe, I mean, you never know. They might want to do a Gambit movie. Fingers crossed. They might want to do a Rogue movie. And Rogue is someone who I feel the movies have particularly underserved. By essentially making her a mix of Rogue and Jubilee, with more Jubilee than Rogue. And to me, Rogue is not supposed to be a schoolgirl. She's supposed to be a woman. Mm-hmm. And because I'd love to see Rogue portrayed properly. And that's not a diss to Anna Paquin, because I think she's a very good actress, but I just never really meshed with the character of Rogue in those movies. I think we are definitely going to see these characters again. They're not going to be the same actors. I think we need to say goodbye, sadly, to James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender, which is sad because they are amazing. And I think we know we need to say goodbye to Hugh Jackman, because they will recast Wolverine, even though, as I've said, it should be Laura. But I don't think they will use Daphne Keane, but they should. Do you have any thoughts about what you would like to see Disney do with the characters? Do you have any suggestions for them, if they're listening?
Honestly, I don't have any suggestions, just because I don't like to think too much about it, because if I have high hopes on something and it doesn't happen, or it does happen and it flops, then I'm just like, well, that's just great. But in terms of an X-Men character who I'd like to see more of, growing up, I watched the X-Men Evolution animated series. It was airing on Kids WB, and I was in elementary school at the time, and I fell in love with Shadowcat in the animated series. So, and I also loved Ellen Page in the franchise movies.
Yes.
She's one of my favorite actors. So I would like to see the character Shadowcat come back again. And obviously they didn't have the dragon in the franchise, but maybe that's something Disney can consider.
Well, if Disney are listening, which I can't guarantee they are, in fact, they probably aren't. But I would say you never know. We just don't know what they're going to do with these characters. But I think when you're talking about the X-Men, you've got so many characters
so many possibilities.
Yeah, exactly. And as fans of the X-Men, I think that Disney and Marvel specifically, Marvel up until now has known what it's doing with the majority of its characters. There have been some missteps, but overall, I think that they know what they're doing and they know what they need to do. So I do have confidence in Kevin Feige that he will treat the X-Men and the Fantastic Four correctly. Whether that will happen, I think only time will tell, but I do have faith in Kevin Feige to do the right thing. So it's obviously going to be up to them, but I think that, we just got to wait and see. So we're going to round up the discussion now, because obviously we're coming to the end of the issues section. So I think, to be honest, we did have quite a few good points as well as quite a few issues. So I think ultimately they're balancing out a little bit, because I didn't want to be in a situation where we had no good points and all of the issues, because that's not great. There are good points about this movie, and I think we've made it clear that there are. If I was to ask you to rank the newer movies, so I'm talking First Class, Days of Future Past, Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix, how would you rank them from your favourite to your least favourite?
Days of Future Past, First Class. I don't remember that much from Apocalypse, which is a bad sign.
That's not a bad thing.
Okay, because I don't remember much from Apocalypse, I'm going to put Dark Phoenix at number 3 and Apocalypse at number 4.
Okay. Well, that's interesting because I thought about mine as well, and mine was Days of Future Past, First Class. I mean, to be honest, it's not particularly difficult because, you know, we know which are the good ones and which are the bad ones. But then I thought about Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix, and I would put Apocalypse above Dark Phoenix, but only because Apocalypse feels like more of an X-Men movie than Dark Phoenix.
There was definitely more action in Apocalypse now that I think about it.
Yeah, but that does not mean that Apocalypse is... It's difficult to rank them, I think, because Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix are very different. I think the performances are better in Dark Phoenix, but I think Apocalypse is more of an X-Men movie. So,
okay.
Yeah, that's really the only reason. That's the only reason Dark Phoenix would be at the end. But again, that doesn't mean it's like 100% terrible. It's just a ranking. So before I let you go, ChinLin, I wanted to ask you, because obviously we've talked a little bit about the franchise, and obviously we can't go into the franchise in detail because we would literally be here forever because there's so many movies. But I guess I just wanted to sort of get from you your favourite X-Men movie of all time. And I mean, if you want to split it into kind of original, and obviously we know Days of Future Past is your favourite out of the newer ones, and then I think we could probably guess what your favourite sort of spin-off would be. But
oh yeah, I already said it.
But yeah, what is your favourite of the original trilogy?
So of the original, X2 was my favorite.
It's so good.
Of the newer films, obviously Days of Future Past, and then Logan for the spin-off.
Do you know what? My choices are exactly the same as yours.
Oh my god!
Seriously, I love X2.
My audio thing just went really high.
That was probably my voice. Sorry.
That's so cool. I mean,
yeah.
there's like what, 12 movies? 1, 2, 3,
I think so.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 12.
Yeah.
Hey, I counted it right.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the list on Google, so it's including Deadpool.
Yes. Yeah. Because canonically, obviously, it is a spin-off. So yeah, I do enjoy Deadpool a lot. I think it's hilariously funny. But as a movie, Logan it's just perfection. I mean, you can't get better than Logan. And X2, that opening scene in the White House with Nightcrawler is just... Oh, it's genuinely my favourite opening scene of all time in any movie ever made. I think it's phenomenal. And yeah, X2 generally and Days of Future Past of the new, as I mentioned before, the mix of the old and the new. I absolutely adore Days of Future Past. So yeah, we had exactly the same.
And one reason why I picked Days of Future Past is because I'm a huge geek when it comes to time travel.
Me too.
So anything that has a little bit of time travel, I'm gonna want to watch at some point.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
Yeah,
but
definitely. Just before we end, as I mentioned earlier, I did ask online for feedback on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter on Dark Phoenix. I did get a comment on Instagram, but it was actually a comment from a person who hadn't seen the movie. So I'm not going to include it because they've not seen the movie, and it was basically just saying how he thinks it looks like a good movie. So I just commented back and I said, well, I think you should see it. But otherwise, I haven't had very many comments on Twitter, which is interesting considering the movie has just come out. And normally I get quite a few comments when I ask people for thoughts on movies. And I know quite a few people have seen this movie, but maybe they don't want to say, or maybe they didn't see that I was looking for comments. I'm not sure. But so I had 4. So I'm just going to go through them. So on Twitter, at the FlixPod said, I saw this earlier this week. I thought it was emotionally sterile. The 2 big emotional beats just did not work, and one was spoiled by being in the trailer. Another poor blockbuster in a summer of poor blockbusters. Which is a very fair point, actually. This summer we've had a few franchise blockbusters that have come out, and apart from Endgame, obviously, which was literally the biggest thing ever, I think, everything else has just been really lackluster and a bit poor, which is obviously disappointing. But I think that's just the way of Hollywood with blockbuster movies. They rely on franchises, and as we've seen with Dark Phoenix, sometimes the franchise just doesn't work. And we mentioned earlier about the big emotional points. For example, the death of Mystique. I didn't feel any emotion at all to her death whatsoever. So I think it was emotionally sterile. I think the only person who wasn't was Sophie Turner. But you can't expect her to carry the burden of all of the emotional impact of the whole movie. I think that's unfair. So, yeah, I think that, again, a very valid point. At You're on Claude 9, which is my friend Claudia, said, like in the comics, I wish the Hellfire Club would have more of a larger role in the films, mostly Sebastian Shaw and Emma Frost. Also, one of my most favourite memories of childhood is watching Saga on the X-Men cartoon. Which, again, is my first experience of the Dark Phoenix Saga was on the original cartoon. So, and then at Dr. Shades 24 replied to Claudia saying, they butchered X-Men, hopefully Marvel Studios does it proper.
Oh my.
Yeah. They haven't done brilliantly with this movie and the previous movie. So I do think that Marvel Studios does have either a blessing or a curse. It could be seen as both. But I think as long as they give it time and they treat the characters with respect, then I think that they will do fine with it in a few years' time. But yeah, and then Lorraine from at SMTPcast, she actually DM'd me to say, I was a bit disappointed in Dark Phoenix. The action scenes were epic though. That train. It just lacked in story. It was very disjointed and did not flow like the others. I don't feel the character of Vuk worked. It wasn't explored enough. I'm a huge X-Men fan and so desperately wanted to enjoy this, but found myself a little bored when the scenes solely relied on dialogue. Which, to be fair, I think is a really good summary of pretty much everything we've said so far.
I agree with you, Lorraine.
Yeah.
100%.
100%, Lorraine. You have literally summarised this whole episode in 4 lines. Yeah, it's interesting, I guess, because sometimes when you get comments, you can get a range of comments, and usually the movies that I feature on Verbal Diorama, it's usually very positive comments because people go, oh, I love that movie, it's great, you know, I've got great memories of that movie. And then for this, it's just like the comments feel lackluster, but then the movie felt lackluster as well. So you can't really expect anyone to be all like, oh, wow, I love that movie, because the movie is lackluster. The comments are completely deserving of the movie, or the movie's deserving of the comments, I mean. So it is what it is. And that's kind of, I feel like we're kind of finishing on a bit of a low point, but it is what it is. It's not terrible, but it's really not fantastic, and it should be fantastic. So anyway, we have obviously reached the end of the show. So what I want to give you now, ChinLin, before I say goodbye to you. Obviously, firstly, I want to thank you for coming on Verbal Diorama and talking to me about Dark Phoenix. It's been really wonderful to talk to you and to get your opinions. And so obviously, thank you so much for coming on. I want to obviously give you an opportunity to plug your show, and I want you to obviously tell people where they can find you and how they can listen to you guys.
Well, no, thank you for having me on, Em. It's always nice to be able to be a guest on someone else's podcast. So everyone can find the Bingeables Podcast on Twitter at Bingeables Pod. That's BingeablesPod. Honestly, we're only on Twitter because I didn't want to manage more social media accounts than I already currently manage, and I feel the most comfortable on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I can just get the most engagement out of Twitter. I've been using Twitter since like 2010. So, sorry guys, we're just on Twitter. But you can listen to the Bingeables Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts. We're on Anchor as well, and Anchor will like take it to like some of the smaller platforms. I think Radio Public is one of them. I don't have the whole list memorized, but I should probably like make a list at some point. I think we're on like 10 total, but yeah, we are on the major ones.
Yeah. So it should be pretty easy for people to find you.
Yeah.
Great. Well, as I said, thank you to ChinLin for coming on, and thank you everyone for listening to Verbal Diorama. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Dark Phoenix or the X-Men movies in general. I'm always happy to talk about the X-Men movies. My next episode will be out in 2 weeks, and I have another special guest on that episode. I've kind of gone for like a big block booking of special guests, and obviously this will be my last special guest for a little while, and then I'm going to go back to doing some solo shows. But this guest is actually going to be Jason from Wulong Talks. I was on his show a couple of months ago, and we had such a wonderful time. He's such a lovely guy, and together we're going to be looking at the movie that I've loved every damn day for 20 years, 1999's The Mummy, starring Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz, and expect a full-on love-in for that one, especially for Evie, because she's the best. If you like this episode, I've also done episodes on Titan AE, Captain Marvel, Dread, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow, Pleasantville, The Cabin in the Woods, Speed, Aladdin 1992 and 2009, and Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl. And they can all be downloaded wherever you get your podcasts from. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at Verbal Diorama. You can email me general hellos, feedback or suggestions, verbaldiorama@gmail.com. If you like what I do and you want to leave me a great review, you can do so on iTunes, and I obviously really appreciate that. Or if you want to buy me a coffee, you can do so at ko-fi.com/verbaldiorama. Thanks again for listening. I will see you next time, and my telepathic powers are telling me that you're going to press stop now.